Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. So today we're unpacking what we call the architect's blueprint framework for managerial decision making. If you really think about it, a manager is a lot like an architect. Before they lay a single brick, an architect absolutely needs a meticulously crafted blueprint, right? It's all about structural integrity. Without it, you aren't building a skyscraper, you're literally just piling up rocks and crossing your fingers. So in this explainer, we're going to explore these foundational management principles together and really build that structural integrity we need to make choices that actually work. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our map for the build today. We'll be covering the core of decision-making, the rational 9-step process, certainty, risk, and uncertainty, solo versus group decisions, and finally, essential decision-making techniques. Let's get to it. Starting off with Section 1, the core of decision-making. We got to pour the foundation before we build the house, right? To build that solid foundation, we really need to define our materials. At its very core, a decision is a conscious choice. It's a choice selected from competing alternatives, and it's directed towards a specific purpose to maximize your objectives. Basically, it's this continuous juggling act of matching limited resources to limited wants. And listen, in the management world, this isn't just some side task. No way. It is the absolute cornerstone of planning. Decision-making is the catalyst that drives the whole planning process forward. Without it, well, no management function, whether you're organizing, actuating, or controlling, can actually get done. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the types of decisions managers face generally fall into two totally distinct buckets. On the one hand, you have program decisions. These are your routine, repetitive, rule-based choices. Think of, opening a standard bank account or a hospital admitting a patient. You're using predetermined rules or habits. It's pretty automatic. But then, on the other hand, we have non-program decisions, and these are the heavy hitters. They deal with unstructured, totally novel situations where there's just no established routine to fall back on. We're talking about massive strategic leaps here, like diversifying into brand new markets or deciding to construct entirely new facilities. These are high stakes, they involve huge expenditures, and they demand some seriously robust knowledge from top-level management. Moving right along to Section 2, the rational 9-step process. Because as you'll see, decision-making isn't magic. It's a structured engineering process. So let's walk through the first 5 steps of this heavy lifting. Picture this. You're launching a brand new product. Step 1, diagnose and define the problem. Or, hey, maybe it's an opportunity. An opportunity could be an unsatisfied need in the market that you can profitably exploit. Then, Step 2, establish specific goals. Since all behavior is goal-oriented, you absolutely need clear decision criteria to actually measure your success. Step 3, generate alternatives. Pro tip here, never just jump at the very first obvious solution. Brainstorm a bit. Step 4, gather and analyze the relevant facts and data to see what resources you actually have available. And then, Step 5, evaluate those alternatives against the criteria you just set in Step 2. You're basically ranking them from most desirable to least realistic based on how well they solve your must-haves and your should-haves. All right, once all that heavy evaluation lifting is done, it's time to actually pull the trigger. Step 6 is selecting the best alternative. Then Step 7, which is super crucial before you make a move, analyze the possible consequences. You've got to anticipate any resistance to change or how your competitors might react. Then comes Step 8, implement the decision. Now, pay attention here because this is the absolute crux of it. Unfortunately, no decision is better than the action taken to make it a reality. If your team isn't willing or able to carry it out, the whole thing fails. You can't just manipulate people like they're inanimate resources, You have to communicate effectively. And finally, Step 9 is follow-up. You measure your actual results against your planned results, and if things are off track, you make changes, even if that literally means reactivating the entire 9-step process all over again. All right, Section 3, certainty, risk, and uncertainty. Let's take a look at the weather conditions we're building in because managers rarely operate in perfectly clear weather. So these categories brilliantly illustrate the 3 distinct states a manager might operate in. First, under certainty, it's sunny skies. You have complete knowledge, you know the exact costs, the exact capacities, and your action leads to one definitive outcome. It's safe, but let's be real, it's incredibly rare. Next, there's risk. Here, your information is incomplete, but it's still reliable. You might have multiple possible outcomes, but thanks to past data, you know the probability of each one actually happening. But then we hit that third condition, uncertainty. This is highly ambiguous territory. You've got a meager database, you really can't assess the likelihood of future events, and suddenly decisions become very subjective. Uncertainty is exactly where managers are the least confident and the most prone to errors. Think of something like entering a highly volatile foreign market. When you're in the dark like this, you have to rely super heavily on logic, intuition, and your past experience. Next up, Section 4, Solo versus Group Decisions. It's time to choose our construction crew. There is always this organizational tug of war between acting alone and pooling brainpower. When we compare the two, context is literally everything. Individual decision-making, it's absolutely perfect for those routine, programmed decisions where the risk is low, like assigning daily tasks or handling a pretty standard customer complaint. It's fast, it's efficient. But the sheer complexity of modern organizations heavily drives the need for group decision-making. The issues we face today have just grown way beyond the expertise of any single manager. For those highly complex non-programmed decisions we were talking about earlier, you absolutely need the unique knowledge, the experience, and the shared expertise of a full team. So, when we weigh these approaches against each other, individual decisions are, for sure, incredibly fast. The responsibility is crystal clear, and honestly, the manager gets a high degree of job satisfaction. But the major downsides? You're working with limited information, personal biases creep in, and you often lack support from stakeholders because, well, they weren't consulted. On the flip side, groups are fantastic because they provide really comprehensive information, they help eliminate those individual biases, and they build massive commitment for implementation. Why? Because the people actually doing the work had a say in it. But you guessed it, groups can be super expensive and really time-consuming. Plus, they can fall victim to personality conflicts, the focus effect where everyone just gets stuck on one single idea, or that intense social pressure to just conform so you aren't the odd person out. Finally, Section 5, Essential Decision-Making Techniques. Let's open up the toolkit and look at some scientific methods used to evaluate performance. The very first tool in our kit is brainstorming. Often just being in a face-to-face group creates inhibitions. People are terrified of sounding silly. Brainstorming is designed to completely remove that fear and spark raw, unfiltered creativity using 3 really basic rules. First, no idea is too ridiculous. In fact, those totally outlandish ideas, actively encouraged. Second, the second an idea is spoken, it belongs to the group, not the individual. That way, everyone can just build right on top of it. And third, absolutely no criticism is allowed during the session. Period. The entire goal here is generation, not evaluation. Let's move along and see how this raw creativity builds into more structured consensus tools. Here we're comparing the Delphi technique and the nominal group technique, or NGT. The Delphi technique is so fascinating because the experts involved never actually meet face-to-face. They are physically distant, and they use a series of anonymous written questionnaires. After each round, they read everyone's anonymous answers and revise their own until a consensus is finally reached. It completely avoids those hasty, aggressive debates. NGT, on the other hand, brings about 7 to 10 people together face-to-face. But here's the catch. First, they write their ideas down entirely in silence. Then they share them one by one without any discussion. Finally, they have a highly structured discussion and mathematically vote on the priorities. So choosing between these two highly successful tools really just comes down to your available time, your budget, and how physically close your experts are to one another. Next up, we have 2 really powerful economic tools. Marginal analysis is incredibly useful when your main objective is to maximize profit. It's built on this simple postulation that profit is maximized right at the exact point where marginal revenue, so your additional revenue, exactly equals your marginal cost. Cost-benefit analysis, though, acts as a sort of direct upgrade to this. It allows the decision maker to compare the ratio of costs to benefits across completely different alternative courses of action. It really helps you find the absolute least costly means of hitting your objective, which ensures your expenditure yields the greatest possible value, a real game changer. And our final tool for the day is the decision tree. This is a graphical method that maps out decision points, chance events, and probabilities. Think about deciding between installing this super expensive permanent equipment with low running costs, or maybe going with cheaper technology that has higher running costs but lowers your overall capital risk if the product completely flops. A decision tree visually branches all these options out, assigning actual financial values and probabilities to every single outcome. It's brilliant because it takes broad, kind of fuzzy judgments and replaces them with calculated probabilities. It pulls those hidden premises right out into the open so you can clearly see the underlying reasoning process even when you're dealing with major uncertainty. So there you have it. We've poured the foundation, we've framed the steps, analyzed the weather, chosen our crew, and fully unpacked the toolkit. Now I'm going to leave you with this. When you walk into the office tomorrow, which decision-making technique will you pull from your newly constructed blueprint to tackle your next big unknown? Will you map out the risks with a decision tree? Or maybe harness the silent genius of your team using the nominal group technique? The architecture of your next great success is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy building.